Welcome back to Globewise Entertainment, where Hollywood's buried secrets and banned masterpieces finally get their spotlight. In today's episode, we're unraveling the shocking stories behind 10 banned films that almost destroyed old Hollywood. These weren't just movies, they were scandals censored for being too bold, too controversial, or too far ahead of their time. From political outrage to moral panic, these films nearly brought the industry to its knees. If you love exploring the side of cinema they tried to silence, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because here at Globewise, we dive deep into the stories others won't tell. And now we want to hear from you. Which of these banned films shocked you the most? Drop your pick in the comments, and let the debate begin. Reefer Madness, 1936. The film that fueled a moral panic. In the depths of the Great Depression, fear was cheap, and outrage sold tickets. In 1936, a strange little film called Reefer Madness began circulating in churches, schools, and town halls across America. Originally titled Tell Your Children, it wasn't made by a major Hollywood studio, but it quickly became one of the most infamous films to ever touch the silver screen. Funded by a church group and later re-edited by an exploitation filmmaker, the movie warned of the so-called dangers of marijuana. But it didn't just warn, it screamed. In this cautionary tale, just one puff of pot could turn clean-cut teens into maniacal criminals, sexual deviants, or suicidal wrecks. It showed hallucinations, jazz-fueled orgies, and even murder, all allegedly caused by cannabis. Audiences were shocked, not by the drug, but by the over-the-top absurdity of the film itself. Yet for decades, it was used by moral crusaders and anti-drug campaigns to terrify parents and influence public policy. What few knew was this: Hollywood wanted nothing to do with it. Studios distanced themselves from the hysteria, fearing government regulation and public backlash. The film was so controversial that it was banned in several states and censored repeatedly, yet it kept re-emerging like smoke in the wind. Ironically, decades later, Reefer Madness would become a cult comedy, laughed at, not feared. But in its time, it was a symbol of just how dangerously powerful propaganda could be. It wasn't just a movie, it was a weapon. And for a moment, it threatened to burn Hollywood to the ground, one puff at a time. 3. Black Narcissus, 1947. In 1947, Black Narcissus arrived like a whispered sin, wrapped in stunning visuals and cloaked in forbidden themes. This British film told the story of nuns sent to a remote Himalayan convent, where isolation, desire, and madness begin to unravel their faith. But it wasn't just the exotic setting or psychological tension that shocked audiences. It was the raw, unfiltered sexuality simmering beneath the surface. Sister Ruth, played by Kathleen Byron, becomes obsessed with a man and spirals into a dangerous emotional breakdown. Her descent, marked by crimson lipstick, wild eyes, and a murderous intent, was something 1940s audiences had never seen in a nun's habit. Religious groups were furious. The Catholic Church in particular called it blasphemous and morally offensive, accusing the filmmakers of sexualizing sacred figures. Several countries, including Ireland and parts of Canada, banned it outright. Even in the US, it was heavily censored or boycotted in some regions. Despite the outrage, Black Narcissus became a cinematic legend. Its success proved something old Hollywood feared: that audiences wanted more than squeaky clean stories. They wanted truth, even if it was ugly, sensual, and banned. 4. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. The film that broke Hollywood's morals. In 1933, Paramount Pictures dared to tell a story America wasn't ready to hear. The story of Temple Drake followed a Southern socialite, Temple, beautiful, reckless, and spoiled, played by the luminous Miriam Hopkins. But what started as a tale of flirtation turned into something far darker and far more dangerous. Based on William Faulkner's controversial novel Sanctuary, the film shocked audiences with its brutal themes: sexual assault, murder, and moral decay. Temple is kidnapped by a gangster, taken to a rundown brothel, and subjected to horrifying violence, something never before shown so boldly on the big screen. The production code, still voluntary at the time, couldn't contain the backlash. Religious leaders, civic groups, and state censorship boards exploded in outrage. Headlines warned of the film's perversion, calling it a menace to decency. Paramount, shaken, pulled the film from some cities, but it was too late. The scandal was so severe that it triggered a complete overhaul of Hollywood's moral compass. Just 1 year later, the Hays Code was enforced with full authority, locking down Hollywood content for the next 3 decades. The story of Temple Drake didn't just cause controversy. It changed the rules of filmmaking forever. 5. Peeping Tom, 1960. The film that killed a legend. In the spring of 1960, London's fog seemed thicker than usual, almost as if the city itself wanted to hide what was about to be unleashed. Michael Powell, once hailed as a genius of British cinema for masterpieces like The Red Shoes and Black Narcissus, was about to unveil something very different. Something darker. Peeping Tom wasn't just another film. It was a deep dive into the twisted mind of a killer, a man who filmed women in their final moments and found pleasure in it. The studio executives were nervous. The censors were anxious. Powell was defiant. "Art," he said, "must not flinch." The film opened quietly at a handful of theaters. Then the reviews rolled in. "Sick," one critic sneered. "Evil, perverted filth," another declared. One headline screamed, "Ban this movie." Audiences stormed out. Protesters gathered outside cinemas. Some theaters pulled it mid-showing. No one had ever shown this level of voyeurism and psychological horror on the big screen. Not even Hitchcock's Psycho, which came out just months later. But while Hitchcock was praised for his innovation, Powell was destroyed. Almost overnight, Michael Powell's career crumbled. The man behind some of the most beautiful and poetic films in cinema was now a pariah. Untouchable in Britain, unwanted in Hollywood. Peeping Tom was banned or heavily censored in several countries. Its reels gathered dust in vaults. Powell moved into obscurity, his phone silent, his genius forgotten. But time is a strange editor. Decades later, film historians and directors, Martin Scorsese among them, rediscovered Peeping Tom. They called it visionary, bold, and decades ahead of its time. It became a cult classic and was finally recognized as a psychological masterpiece. But for Powell, the redemption came too late. His film didn't just peek into the abyss. It jumped in, and nearly took old Hollywood with it. 6. Lage Door, 1930. The film that sparked a riot. In 1930, a film unlike any other flickered onto the screen in Paris. A surrealist fever dream titled Lage Door, directed by Luis Buñuel and co-written with Salvador Dali. It was bold, blasphemous, and bizarre, and old Hollywood took notice in fear and fascination. The film dared to mock religion, bourgeois morality, and even the idea of sacred love. One scene showed a priest being thrown out the window. Another hinted at Jesus mingling with depraved libertines. Audiences had never seen anything like it. Within days of its premiere, Lage Door became a powder keg. On the 6th night of its Paris run, far-right Catholic protesters stormed the theater. They hurled ink at the screen, tore paintings from the lobby walls, and smashed the projector. The French government quickly banned the film, and it remained unseen for nearly 50 years. In Hollywood, the film's notoriety sent shockwaves. Studios that once flirted with surrealism pulled back in fear of public backlash. The censorship news tightened. Buñuel was blacklisted in multiple countries. Dali distanced himself. And Lage Door became a whispered legend, the movie that defied the heavens, and nearly destroyed the freedom of cinema before it could begin. 7. A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951. Censored, condemned, and Oscar-crushed. In 1951, Tennessee Williams' smoldering stage play A Streetcar Named Desire roared onto the big screen, and immediately collided with the iron fist of Hollywood censorship. The film, directed by Elia Kazan and starring the electric Marlon Brando and Vivien Leigh, had all the ingredients of a scandal: sexual desire, mental illness, domestic violence, and a searing rape scene that pulsed beneath the surface like a ticking time bomb. But the real firestorm came from the Catholic Legion of Decency and the powerful enforcers of the Hays Code, Hollywood's moral police. The original play portrayed Blanche DuBois as a broken woman, haunted by her gay husband's suicide and ultimately assaulted by her sister's husband, Stanley Kowalski. But these themes were too taboo for 1950s screens, so the censors swooped in. Gone were the explicit mentions of homosexuality. Gone were key moments showing Stanley's rape of Blanche. Instead, the final cut blurred brutality into implication. Director Kazan was forced to soften Stanley's monstrous edge and present a more morally acceptable ending. Entire lines were redubbed, scenes were sliced, and a raw, complex story was reshaped to fit into a box labeled decency. But the audience still felt the heat. Despite the cuts, or perhaps because of them, A Streetcar Named Desire exploded in theaters. Brando's performance as Stanley was feral, unforgettable. Vivien Leigh's descent into madness was haunting. The film won 4 Oscars, but censorship had stripped it of its full power and cost Brando the Best Actor win, many said. Behind the scenes, tensions simmered. The actors were furious. Tennessee Williams disowned the censored version, and critics wondered, if a film this honest, this painful couldn't be shown truthfully, what was Hollywood really afraid of? In the end, Streetcar didn't just shake moviegoers, it shook the very foundation of old Hollywood. It was proof that grown-up stories couldn't survive in a system still clinging to outdated morality. This wasn't just a movie. It was a war between art and censorship. And though wounded, A Streetcar Named Desire would eventually help dismantle the Hays Code, paving the way for a new era of bold, unflinching cinema. 8. The Public Enemy, 1931. The Gangster That Shook America. In 1931, as America was still reeling from Prohibition and the scars of the Great Depression, Warner Brothers dropped a bombshell, The Public Enemy. Starring a young James Cagney, the film was raw, violent, and unapologetic, following the rise and brutal fall of a ruthless gangster. But what really shocked audiences wasn't just the crime. It was Cagney's brutal charisma and the film's bold message. Crime sometimes pays until it doesn't. One scene sealed its place in controversy forever. Cagney smashing a grapefruit into his girlfriend's face. It was unscripted, shocking, and deeply symbolic of a new dangerous kind of masculinity in cinema. Censors tried to block the film, calling it immoral and a glorification of violence. Cities like Chicago and Ohio threatened outright bans. Religious leaders decried its message. Even the U.S. government began to worry about films inspiring real-life crime. But the public couldn't look away. The backlash was so fierce, The Public Enemy became one of the final straws that led Hollywood to enforce the production code, a strict censorship guideline that would strangle creative freedom for over 3 decades. Cagney became a star. The gangster genre exploded, and The Public Enemy walked away as both a cinematic triumph and a cultural grenade that nearly got Hollywood shut down. 9. Intolerance, 1916. The epic that fought back. In 1916, legendary director D.W. Griffith stood on the edge of public disgrace. His previous film, The Birth of a Nation, had made cinematic history, but also ignited a firestorm of protest over its blatant racism and glorification of the Ku Klux Klan. Griffith needed redemption, so he did what only a silent-era visionary could do. He created one of the most ambitious, expensive, and audacious films of all time. That film was Intolerance. Told across 4 interwoven timelines, ancient Babylon, Judea during Christ's time, 16th century France, and modern-day America, Intolerance was a massive emotional plea against bigotry, injustice, and moral hypocrisy. With colossal sets, thousands of extras, and revolutionary editing techniques, Griffith hoped to prove that he was not a man of hate, but a champion of understanding. But the world wasn't ready. The film was banned or censored in multiple countries, not for obscenity, but for political and religious content. In France, it was seen as anti-Catholic. In parts of the U.S., it was attacked for criticizing powerful institutions. Its themes were too bold, too unflinching. Worse, audiences were confused by the film's complex structure. The movie bombed at the box office, nearly bankrupting Griffith and devastating his career. Yet Intolerance would go on to inspire future filmmakers like Eisenstein, Kubrick, and Scorsese. Its groundbreaking technique, cross-cutting between timelines, changed film language forever. Still, in its own time, Intolerance was seen as a radical failure, a film too ambitious, too political, and too dangerous. And for daring to challenge the very foundations of prejudice, it was nearly buried by the same intolerance it sought to destroy. 10. Aniian Analoo, 1929. The film that sliced through reality. In 1929, two young revolutionaries, Luis Buñuel and Salvador Dali, set out to destroy everything Hollywood stood for. Their weapon? A 21-minute short film that would become one of the most infamous in cinema history. Aniian Analoo, an Andalusian dog. There was no plot, no logic, just images pulled straight from dreams and nightmares. An oozing hand crawling with ants, a dead donkey atop a piano, and most shockingly, a razor blade slicing open a woman's eye in one of the most disturbing scenes ever put to film. It wasn't entertainment. It was an attack on narrative, on meaning, on comfort. And it worked. Audiences fainted. Riots broke out. Religious groups and conservative critics demanded it be banned. Several countries complied. Even in artistic circles, the film sparked outrage. Yet it was also praised by surrealists, anarchists, and radicals as a declaration of war on bourgeois cinema. Hollywood didn't know what to do with it. Aniian Analoo didn't just challenge the industry, it mocked it. It laughed in the face of censorship, logic, and narrative structure. It proved that film could be chaos, could be pain, could be a dream you wish you could wake up from. Though short in length, it cast a long shadow. Studios grew fearful of surrealism, experimental filmmakers were blacklisted, and any movie that tried to break the rules risked being shut down. This little film didn't just bend the rules. Stabbed them in the eye. And there you have it, 10 banned films so explosive they nearly shattered old Hollywood from the inside out. These weren't just controversial movies. They were bold statements that challenged censorship, shook the system, and changed the film industry forever. Some were silenced, others buried, but all of them left a mark Hollywood could never erase. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Because here at Globewise Entertainment, we bring you the untold truths, the banned reels, and the legends behind the silver screen. Now it's your turn. Which of these films shocked or fascinated you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we read them all. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one, where the secrets of cinema are always in the spotlight.